First thing is, I hope you can understand my English. That is the first thing. But what we're going to do is we're going to talk about Africa. And the big question is the end of Africa's game with a question mark. What are we going to have in a few years' time? Right. We're going to take a date. 2050, that's 30 years from now. And then we're going to work out if we're going to have game left in Africa. What is the status of the nature conservation in Africa? To predict the future, you have to go back in time and history and see what happened. And we start 200,000 years ago. Homo sapiens built up in Eastern Africa. Africa is the place where humans developed. That's where they came from, the cradle of humankind. Then they start migrating. Groups starting to migrating to the south and the groups migrating to the north. And about 100,000 years ago, they crossed into Europe. And what they did find there is that Europe in ice age, a lot of ice, glaciers in northern Europe, and not a hospitable place for humans. But it was the end of the ice age, and it's global warming, the climate changed, and the glaciers recede. And the moment they recede, humans invaded or migrated into that area 40,000 years ago. And immediately what happened? There was a human species, Homo Neanderthal, it just disappeared. The woolly rhino disappeared. The cave lion, the hyena, the huge hyena, the elephant, giant deer. All these animals just disappeared the moment humans moved into the area. Two things: climate change, buildup of human population. And 23 genera, that's 59% of all the megafauna, just died out the moment humans migrated into the area. Just before that, the same thing happened when humans migrated to the east. Another human being, Homo denisovans, disappeared the moment humans arrived at the sea. 24 genera, that's 52% of megafauna disappeared in this area. The same thing of North America. 15,000 years they crossed the Bering Strait. A lot of glaciers recede to the north, and 45 genera, that is 74% of all megafauna disappeared. A very interesting thing, there's a little island there, that's Wrangler Island. They missed that one 15,000 years ago. But 5,000 years ago, they did discover that place, and then they killed out the last animals there as well. Same thing about South America. 12,000 years ago, they crossed into South America, and 58 genera, that's 82% of all megafauna, just died. Very interesting, they missed the West Indies, that area there. There was a big, huge, giant anteater, but 5,000 years ago, they discovered that place and also wiped out everything there. Very interesting, at that stage, the Amazon was still mostly savanna, and they wiped out all the animals in that area as well. So they also migrated to Australia, along the Indonesian islands. There's another human being there, Homo florensis, they wiped that one out as well. The moment they get into Australia, they wiped out 14 mammal genera, 88 species. But what was interesting is that no aqua species was lost. So we had global changes, warming, and people moving in the area. But this indicates that humans were more responsible than the climate change alone. Very interesting, Madagascar, 1,500 years. Immediately when humans arrived, 14 species disappeared. Very interesting, New Zealand, 700 years ago, 45 species disappeared the moment the humans arrived at that place. So what we have is, you've got climate change, warming, plus human population increase, you get extinction. So now with that knowledge, let's go to Africa. And we go specifically to this area. Very interesting area. I think a lot of people, you know, in the news at the moment. This is the Afar Depression. This is Somalia, this is Ethiopia. This is the Tigray area. A lot of problems there. Lake Tana, northern Kenya, the Chalbi Desert. And it's 1984. Very interesting time in Ethiopia. So why do you want to go to Ethiopia? First thing, you want to see Dalol, the Donegal Depression. 100 meters below sea level, one of the harshest places in the world, one of the warmest places, but beautiful. It's a beautiful place. Second thing you want to see is Erten Ella, active volcanoes. And this volcano has been active for a very, very long time. Another thing you want to see is the special animals. A lot of special animals there. Only get it in those areas. This is the Somalian wild ass running around there in Ethiopia, northern Ethiopia and Somalia. Another thing you want to see is the caravans, the salt caravans of the Afar people. These people collect salt in these old lake beds and transport it for thousands of kilometers, and they did it already for hundreds of years. Another thing you want to see is the Afar people. Very interesting people, a nomad people, and you can see this Afar man, and that was just after 1984. And you can see what they look like, the big dagger, the body, what they do is they mutilate them sort of, and they like it a lot. And every man carries an AK-47. Very aggressive people. That's an Afar woman. And that was about 33 years ago. That's what they look like. But 84 is the big drought. That was the big drought, the infamous drought that everybody talks about in Ethiopia. This is the Afar people, they're nomads, but they're in desperate situation here. All the animals died. Very aggressive people. They don't allow people in the area, but because of the drought, we could get in there and take the photographs. Here you can see what they look like. What happened at this stage is just a little bit after 84. The government and aid organizations just bringing water. You can see the water, how dirty the water is, and you can see the people, how thin they are. But this was a desperate situation. This is a photo of James Nachtwey, very famous photo that tells the story of what happened there. Journalists and photographs actually brought this whole situation to the Western world, and they first realized what is going on there. Very interesting photo. This is a photo of Tom Stoddart. He died of cancer a few years ago. But what happens in a crisis like this is you get the bad and the good in human beings. This is the bad. This little boy had, they gave him food in that bag, and a man just walked past, take the food from him and walked away. But what also happened is the good came out. And a lot of people, and especially Europe and America, starts giving food to the Ethiopians. And what they do is they gather in these huge groups, and the food came in truckloads, and they feed these people. So what happened in 1984, just to summarize the famine, 8 million victims at that stage. And this is all this area from here to the drought there. 1.2 million people died. And the very interesting thing, at that stage, Mengistu, the Dirk, was in control of Ethiopia, and they killed 150,000 people in this area at that time. And that left 200,000 orphans. In the same time, at the exactly same time as the crow flies, about 180 kilometers from there is the Seaman Mountains. This photo was taken at the same trip. And that's what it looks like in the Seaman Mountains. A lot of water, no problem at all. And this is a special tribe living in the Seaman Mountains. Seaman Mountains is a very special area with a lot of special animals. The gelada baboons. They eat only grass. And you can see the slopes at the back is the forested areas and the grass on top. They've got very special structures and different herd structures, the gelada baboons. Here you can see the lip, what they do, the lip, when they show off. And what they do is the males form groups, very aggressive, and attack other. It's fantastic to sit there, take photographs, you walk with them, and incredible thing to see. This is the Valia ibex. A lot of them there, big ibex with big horns, very strong animal. Just south of that, at the same time as the Bali Mountains, and that's what it looks like there. As I say, you've got the drought on the one side, and you've got different Ethiopia on the other side. Very special animals, Seaman wolves. If you look around, also you can follow them on foot. You can follow them when they hunt, and how they eat and everything. Even further south, you get the Swains hartebeest, and you can see what the veld looked like at the same time as you've got the drought in the northeast. And this is the female. What they did is the numbers just starts dwindling. They created this Jabele Wildlife Park, especially for swans, hartebeeks, and also some other parks like these 3 parks with the swans, hartebeeks in to save them. So that is an Ethiopian. The first time I've been there is just after 1984. And then the last time that I visited is 2017. Ethiopian people, fantastic people, very easy to travel. They're all friendly, in spite of all the stories. A fantastic country to visit. Then what happened in that time? Ayrton Ella is still there, beautiful and fantastic to visit. The Afar people still got salt caravans. It's just the clothes is modern clothes now, and not the old clothes. The Somalian wild ass is not, you will not find them there. We try to find them, it's not possible. If you're lucky, you'll probably find some of them in Somalia, and then you need to put in an expedition. There is some of them in a zoo in Israel and Tel Aviv, but they disappeared. Somalian wild ass, not in this area anymore. If you go to the Seaman Mountains, no forest left. 30 years, no forest. All the forests cut out, just in 33 years time. And if you go on top of the Seaman Mountains, this is in a national park, it's villages. And what you do is these people, can you see, is plowing in the national park. You can see the grass is also very, very overgrazed. And now they start to plow in the national park. The Valaya ibex of the Valia ibex is critical endangered at the moment. There are probably less than 200 left in the world. They're critically endangered. The gelada monkeys, they're still there, baboons, they're still there, you can still follow them. There's at least 55,000 people. Some people think it's maybe double that size of people living in the park. There's no control. There's no political will to do anything about it. If you go to the Bali Mountains, you still find the Seaman wolves there. But look at that left Seaman wolf. There's different colors. So that is the dogs from the outside of the park breed with these wolves, and you've got these hybrids. And it's very, very bad for nature conservation. If you look at this Seaman wolf catching an ice rat, their main food, this ice rat is also now a critical endangered species, because the people come from the outside the park, overgraze these grasslands, and this is the habitat of this ice rat. So this Seaman wolf is now the most endangered candidate in the world. It's the most endangered carnivore in Africa. There's only 7 isolated ranges, and there's now less than 400 of them left. So they're critically endangered. All the other animals in the area as well. This is the Mountainella. Their numbers came up at one stage, and now lately they're also going down. Everything now endangered these special places. If you look at this area here, this is the Bali mountain range, the Bali National Park. And this is what is going on around it. We talked about it. Same thing is what happened around Kruger National Park. Chris, you've got a lot of statistics he can give you, but this is what it looks like next to the park, right around Bali National Park. This is in the national park. People are starting living in the park. So it's a very special place. All these endemic species, at least 50,000 people living in the park, and there's 2 million people living right around the park. It's a little island at the moment. If you want to go and see if you can find the Swain's hartebeest in Jabele Wildlife Park, the moment that they proclaimed this park as a wildlife park, there were no Swain's hartebeest left there. So also in the Tsamo Abu National Park, where you could find Swain's hartebeest, nothing. The last time I drove in there, I was alone. I tried to find Swain's hartebeest, not in one of those. This specific park had a lot of game in it. When I arrived there the last time, this is what I found. No wildlife, not a single animal, wildlife that I could find in this national park, only people. So in this park as well, they disappeared, and this one as well, they disappeared. And the only place in the world you can see them now is Senkele Wildlife Reserve, and that only in 30 years' time. When I visited the last time, I took this photograph, and these people invading the park at the moment. Big problems for these game rangers to keep these people out. Very interesting thing. Then I visited all these places where the aid, the food is given to the people. Truckloads of food arriving at this place. A lot of places, permanent places now. Very well organized, and a lot of people still getting food. So just look at this graph. You will see this is 1984, that's when aid started to flow really in big numbers into in Ethiopia. And you can see it just escalated, and in 2000 it even went up. It doubled to 2003, and it even doubled again to now. So what happened then? If you look at the population of Ethiopia, this is the major droughts. This is the last one, and this is when they start with aid. What the population of Ethiopia has just increased, and it's more than 100 million at the moment. So if you can summarize them, major droughts in Ethiopia, there's the dates of all the droughts in Ethiopia. That's a regular thing. So you can say, one, droughts are normal for most African regions. This is a place that should get droughts. It's normal for it. Intact environments handle droughts very well. So if the humans come and they don't, and you look after the land, it is in pristine condition, a drought is not a problem. It handles it very well. In fact, point number 3, nature needs droughts to restore the balances. You need droughts to do it. If you look at the map of Africa, you can see the variation in rainfall. That's normal for all these areas, these dark areas. There's a normal thing. The variation is normal, so droughts is a normal thing. The northern part of Africa is drying out over 2,000 years or whatever, but you can see the areas that you can expect droughts. It's a normal thing. So post-1984, we can say in 1986, 5.9 million people in Ethiopia depends on aid. 2003, 13.2 million depends on aid. And now even more. So aid did not solve the problem. It saved lives, but it did not solve the problem. So to summarize again, overpopulation, you got environmental destruction. That's the two main things. And then if you've got armed conflict and bad government with it, you've got the destruction of nature. Because this sort of thing just destroyed nature in a big way. And at the moment, as we speak, we've got big problems in Tigray again with conflict in that area. If you go to Kenya, I would like to talk a little bit on this area next to the Jade Sea, Lake Turkana. Okay, let's just talk about the Masai Mara first, because this is a place that everybody knows. This is a wild beast migration, and there's a Mara River. You can see there's a lot of water coming down this river. This is a normal thing. This is a selection process. The weak ones just got killed. They can't swim across, and they die. And what happened is you get the river, and the river takes the bodies away. All these carcasses away. But if the river is very low, the river of the Mara River, the flow just almost disappeared. It's just a trickle at certain times of the year. It can't take these carcasses away. And then this is what happened. You've got the migration on the other side. It's coming through, but there's a lot of dead carcasses this side. And what happened is these wildebeest is just swimming in what I call a hell. This is animal hell for wild beasts. They all die. Is not normal, because these carcasses should be washed away by the river. And if you look what happened at certain places, you can see this. It's no place for those wildebeest to cross. It's just carcasses all over the place. And next day you come there, you can see still some live ones there, very strong ones, but the next day they're all dead. So that is not normal. So what happened? This is the Masai Mara in Kenya. This is in Serengeti. This is the Mara River Basin. This is the Mau escarpment with a lot of forest, and it's a high rainfall area. And there's a lot of deforestation. But the problem is this. It's not rain. You can see here that the Masai Mara's rainfall actually is higher than what it used to be. The problem is overuse. This is the Mara River, and you can see what happens in Kenya just below the escarpment. And it's very ineffective farming there as well. And you can see it's not good farming with all these erosion and things. But that is where the water goes, and that is going to affect the Mara very seriously. This is the Chalbi Desert. I want to talk a little bit about it. A lot of people living in there. You can see these green areas. One of the tribes living there is the Gabra. It's an Afro-Asiatic tribe, very interesting tribe. They're nomads. So what they do is they travel between in the seasons between these green areas and then into the desert. But now they get overpopulated. A lot of other tribes coming in, the Turkana people coming in, the Samburu coming in, and they can't migrate anymore. So it's not possible for them to migrate anymore. And then if a drought strikes, this is what it looks like. This is a friend of mine, Jonas' house. I always visited him, and that is what it looks like. So what happened is these people start walking away because they can't farm here anymore. They can't make a living. And then they're starting to getting in bigger and bigger groups, eventually to places where they get food. This is northern Kenya. And eventually they land up in places like this. This is the slums of Nairobi. And if you go into the slums, this is what it looks like. And there you can see the Gabra. They've got their hotla, the meetings in the slums, and they will never go back to their homes. It's overpopulated. You will never see those places where they grow up. And it's a very special tribe, and they're not going to survive this. If you look at what happened, this is just a fence, and you can see the overgrazing, the destruction of northern Kenya by overgrazing. And this area is even overgrazed. So it's a human-created drought. If you look at the rainfall in this part of Kenya, it actually went up. Central Kenya, the rainfall definitely went down. It's lower than they used to be. But this is a place that gets more rain than usually. The long rains is a little bit off, but the short rains is more. And it's a human-created drought. And you can see the population growth of Kenya. That is the problem. Population growth destroys everything. So I want to go to another place to get some other information. We have to make decisions in the end and see if Africa's game is going to be. Is the Congo Basin. It's a very special place. You had a lecture on that, and so I'm going to not on too much detail. So this is the Congo River. This is one big, second biggest river in the world, but it's the deepest river. But it's an incredible place to visit. It's just incredible. The lowland forest. I'm not going to talk too much about it, but there's a lot of different forests. In the east, this is the Rwenzori's. A very different forest. This is part of the Congo Basin. There's glaciers. If you can go and climb these mountains, it's fantastic to see it. This is Mount Margarita, the highest point in the Rwenzori's. I climbed it from the old Zahirian side already, and also from the Uganda side. Very interesting place. The water that falls on the northern side of this, eastern side of this mountain, it flows down the Nile River, and the ones that falls on the western side down the Congo River, 4,700 kilometers further. If you take a photo like this of the Congo forest, you can see the diversity. If you walk through this area, you will notice that it's very different. Everything is different. This forest here is different than this one. You can see this yellow areas there as well. It's a very diverse forest. And you can see this open areas, they call it bays. That is what you find there in the forest. You know, the forest buffalo, the forest red, the red forest hogs, and then the yellow forest elephants. It depends on where they bath, what color they will be. But fantastic to watch them. They're very different than the savanna elephant. The structures, the herd structures is different. You see little calves running around. They're playing. They're very noisy. And you can watch them on these bays for the whole day. It's an incredible animal. They open up these forests, these clearings. This is the mega gardeners of the Congo forests. The elephants is not only dispersing seeds, they're only clearing up everything. Here you can see what they do is in these mineral licks, they bring up the clay and the minerals from this hole, and you can see it around for all animals, other animals to use. Even I've seen a lot of African greys going to eat at this mineral licks. If you walk in the forest floor where there's a lot of elephants, forest elephants, it's open at the bottom. It's big, huge elephant trails. There you can see it, big trees with open areas, and it's easy to walk on the forest floor where you find elephants. Different forests. If you compare the Congo forests with Borneo and the Amazon, you see the mean tree size of the Congo is a much bigger and taller tree. And the density here you can see is much lower. So very different, and that's elephants that do that. In Borneo, there's also elephants involved, but in Africa, then you need elephants to keep the forest as it is. A lot of other animals. Everybody knows the gorillas. These very special animals like these agal mangabees. That's they diverse from the baboons very late, not recently. They spend a lot of time on the forest floor. That's why you can get a good photograph like this. The Ukapi, I took this photograph almost 40 years ago in the Ituri forest. Incredible animals. And just to summarize, the Congo forest is a huge area, 6 distinct ecoregions, but it's even more than that, spans 6 countries. But look at this. The greatest numbers of birds, mammals, primates, amphibious fish, and insects in the whole of Africa. It's a very, very special place. And we can say this, the Congo Basin is one of the most important wilderness areas left on Earth, without a doubt. It's an incredible place. And yeah, and let's have a look at the humans living in the forest. This is the Baaka, the pygmies. You can see how they make their teeth. It's an incredible experience to go and live with them and hunt with them. What they do is they clear a little area in the forest, they stay there. Before they go hunt out, they pray to the forest gods. There's a little pygmy around, beneath this. They sing and clap hands. Then they go and catch these animals with the nets that they make themselves in the forest. They cut up the food, eat it and stay in a place. And then what they do is, what's very interesting, they move to another area. They stay in maybe a month or a few weeks in one area, and then they move to another area. And that's the way the forest can regenerate and they put no impact on it. They cut new leaves, build a new place, and it's the impact is so little. They can sustainably live in these forests. This is another place, the Staircase of Venus. This is about 1,200 kilometers from the previous pygmies. And this is the Efeb pygmy. And that's also about 40 years ago. You can see the two pygmies there, and they're very skillful bow hunters. Very different from the Baaka. There's also, they're living these clearing areas, but they offer like this. They don't do that forest ghost thing, and then they hunt with the nets and with bows. And also the same thing. They hunt for a few weeks or even months, and then they take up everything and they go and build a new place. And then it's in this way, it's a sustainable way to live in these forests. So there's 75 million people living in the Congo forests. There's about 150 ethnic groups. Interesting thing, just go to the eastern part of the Congo forests. This is Nyarangongo volcano, very nice area. And this is the rim of the volcano. And in the background, you can see there is a volcano, Visoki, and this is Makino. And that's where you find the gorillas, the mountain gorillas, the famous mountain gorillas. If you look at it, this is the Virunga National Park, or the Volcano National Park from the Rwanda side, and that's where they live. It's a little island there. There's also a Ravnini impenetrable forest in Uganda, but this is what it looks like. And this islands with only people around them is a big, big, big problem. This is what it looks like. This is the border of that game reserve where you find all these gorillas. Just to why it is so important that we don't have these little islands. And I'm going to tell you a little story, and most of you know this. Is the previous president of Rwanda, Habyarimana. He flew from Arusha to Kigali, and his plane was shot off on 1994. And this plane fell on his palace. It's incredible. I visited the place a few years ago, and still some of these wrecks still laying in this compound of the palace. And then immediately after that, the genocide of Rwanda broke out. A lot of people, 800,000 people lost their lives. And what happened? All the people fled into this national park. There's a lot of people also fled into the Congo, DRC, in this area. And this is what it looks like if people fled. It's the numbers is staggering, and they just destroy everything in their way. This is a refugees camp in the DRC. And as I say, we visited this area where this refugees camp was, and that is what left after they left. No Virunga National Park in this area anymore. They destroyed it permanently. Then come along this man, Paul Kagame, very interesting man, strong man, and he tried to get this genocide to stop it. He was the leader of the army of Museveni from Uganda, and he made his headquarters in the national park. And then he drove out all the Hutus out of his country, and he stopped the genocide. But what happened is all these Hutus start living in this area, in the Kivu area of the DRC. And they build up numbers as well, and and also start liberation movements. And it was a big problem for Paul Kagame. And then he invaded that areas, and that is the first Congo War started at that stage. And very interesting. That is the camps of the Hutus, and this is Rwanda. They attacked, and Mussolini also helped a little bit of help from Burundi. And that's very important to realize the full scale of this. Zimbabwe, and at that stage, Mobutu Sese Seko were in control of the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Zimbabwe actively gave troops, also Namibia, also Angola, also Chad, and also Sudan. All of them helped Mobutu, and it's also almost Paul Kagame on his own, and this developed in a full-scale war. Very interesting, very interesting. South Africa backed Mobutu Sese Seko. Botswana and Mozambique did. So all these countries involved, some of them active with troops, all fighting against the troops of Paul Kagame. But the Congo War, 9 countries involved, and 25 armed groups as well. Eventually, Mobutu was fled in the country, and it was taken over by Kabila. Mobutu was the Western world, especially America, helped him to stay in power for a very, very long time. Also the World Bank, because he was anti-communist. But eventually, Lawrence Kabila became the new president. But he was even worse. And the Second Congo War broke out, and it ended with the murder of Kabila, and his son Joseph Kabila became the president of the DRC. So, to summarize, the Congo War was the worst ever war in Africa. Of all wars in history, this was the worst ever in Africa. This is the deadliest war since World War II in the world. 5.4 million people dead. The aftermath is that still today, 1,200 people die every day. That's between 30 and 37,000 people a month. What's interesting for me is that people do not know this. It happened, and nobody is really worried about it. But in that time, the Congo or the DRC's population numbers never declined. Never declined, it just went up. The war had no problem or no effect on the population growth. If you look at Rwanda, the same thing. Rwanda is a country torn a lot of wars. It's like droughts in East Africa. Look at all these wars. And if you look at the population growth, the genocide had a big effect, but it took Rwanda only 3 years to breed back the population to the normal levels they had been before. Why is it important for us in nature conservation to know this? This is the Virunga National Park. Look at all the rebel groups that is left now with their headquarters in the national park. This is the guerrilla groups, and you can see this M23 is a guerrilla group, and they're all in the park. And the stability is just incredible that these guerrillas are still there. This is Sultani Makena. This is M23. He's very active in the national park. This Bitran Bisimwa, he initially started off with M23, but he's got another group now, and they call himself the M27. This is another one, Sylvester, but this is one of the Hutus that made his headquarters in the park as well. But he is gone now at the moment. Laurent Kunda is very notorious for killing gorillas. He's come out of the 7 days Athletes, and he's involved in the church as well, but he's notorious for killing gorillas. Very famous gorilla Rafiki. He killed it because he was not happy that he didn't get enough help from somebody. This group of gorillas was killed in that time, possibly by him and his troops. There was also a problem with charcoal gatherers, and they just wiped out this group of gorillas. Very unstable situation. This is a very interesting guy as well. Joseph Kony, Lord's Liberation Army. His power as a military leader was broken, but he's still very active in smuggling of ivory and wood in this area as well. But this is the Virunga National Park there and all the problems around it. But right across this Kivu Lake, there's another park there, the Kuhuzi Biga. And you travel on this lake, this is the only place left with trees. And the only place you will find monkeys around this lake that used to be a forest around it. All the elephants gone after that. No elephants left. Also Nungi Forest, this area, all the elephants gone now. And you've got a few gorillas living in this area. The Grauri gorilla, the biggest one of them all. Fantastic to go and visit them because there's no other people there. There's no tourists there. All these people looking after these gorillas, Kuhuzi Biga game guards. You have to see that there's about 150 of them that died the last 10 years doing their work. And this is the groups, rebel groups that's active in the national park. You know M23 now by now, FNLA as a group is also of a priest coming from Bukavu. The Mai Mais, you know, is a very, very, very vicious group. The Banya Malengas is a Tutsi group that originally came out of Uganda, but they're all active in the Congo, in Kuhuzi Biga National Park. So just to summarize again, Kuhuzi Biga National Park, Grauri is a gorilla. In 1990, there were more than 17,000. And it went down to 2017 to 2005. There is people I talk to that say that's maybe more than that, maybe 4,000. But big problems in the park, civil unrest, poaching, and mining. Coltan, 400 tons out of the park. Wolframite, 1,100 tons, and Kasserit, 15,000 tons that comes out of Kuhuzi National Park. If you look at the DRC and you look at all the conflict events in the DRC, you can see is the green dots and the red areas. This is the green areas you can see there. If you take the mining areas, or this is the groups, the rebel groups, and you take them, this is the mining areas. It's exactly the same areas. So these rebel groups has nothing to do with politics. It's all to do with power and money. This is a rebel group, and there is the mining going on Eastern Congo, and you can see all the forests gone. So it's a big, big, big problem there. If you look at the forest, the Congo forest, you will see there's a little bit left. There's not a lot of intact primary forest left. They're in big, big problems there. If you look at deforestation, the Congo, the DRC is 80% of it for all the other places. The Cameroon, Central African Republic is in comparison not as important as the Congo. The Congo is very important. If you look at the reasons for the deforestation, you will see different reasons. In Gabon and the Republic of Congo, you've got a lot of logging. In DRC, it's almost no logging. It's all small-scale farming that is destroying the forest. And what you have is if you get this clearing of a place, small-scale farming, and then they rotate. But because the people's populations go up, they can't rotate. And it becomes semi-permanent. So it's a big, big problem. Whereas if you take the problems in the Amazon, it is, for instance, clearing for cattle. That's the biggest problem. But the Congo of the DRC is definitely small-scale agricultural. So that is in the Congo the big small-scale subsistence of agriculture is the biggest problem for deforestation. The second one is clearing for charcoal. Those two goes together. Urban expansion third, mining fourth, and logging is at the bottom. But this is going to get more important. This is wood that's been cut in Kuhuzi Biga, and this is the way they do the logging. If you do logging properly in this area, you should not take more than 6 cubic meters out of a hectare. That's less than half a tree. You can see how these people log. They get the roads in and they log everything out. There's nothing left afterwards. They used to take these logs, all these wood on the Congo River to Matari and then out and export them there. But this, because of all the wars, the river transport just ceased totally. And this is a very interesting thing. Nobody really knows what happened. And then suddenly they realized where these woods came. And now they export them. This is the way they export them now. All these Eastern Africa forests, not going west like before. And it's going through, most of it through Kampala and Nairobi out. And there's also like on the top here, it's Jabu in southern Kenya. That's where Joseph Kony is involved. So all these forest products going through these two areas. And it's very interesting, but Museveni is a very strong person. It's very interesting if he knows about this or not. If you look at the where is the map where this wood is going, you will see it's mostly China, Malaysia, and these places import a lot of these wood. But if you look at the world map, you will see that America is using a lot of these illegal logging. Is going into America as well. So DRC logging, 50% of the forest allocated for logging already. What the World Bank did in May 2002, they donate $90 million a year for the Congo or the DRC's government not to give out more logging permits. But they ignored that, and in December 2018 they just stopped it, and they gave the rights to communities. And if you know that the communities are actually doing the most damage, it's not a good step. So 90% of logging in DRC is anyways illegal. So population increase in DRC, 1.7 million a year. The forest lost 1.5 million hectares a year. If you look at the old historical elephant range, you can see the whole of this Congo forests, the whole Congo Basin had elephants, forest elephants. If you look at like now, it's just almost nothing left. There's only 6 viable populations of elephants left in Congo. So even if you stop logging, you stop everything, you haven't got this mega gardeners, as they call them, to shape the Congo forest. It's a big problem, and I think the Congo forest is lost. I think we crossed the threshold to try and get it back. We only get pockets back, but we're going to lose most of it. If you go back, I went back to these pygmies, the airfare. There was about 60,000 to 70,000 of them actively murdered after the Congo wars. The forest is gone. They live like, you can see what they live like. There's no hunting, there's no forest left. That's the Uturi area. If you want to see animals, you go to the meat markets. You can see all these special animals. If you want to see the tree pangolins, this is long-tailed tree pangolin, you go to the meat markets. That's where you find them. And you can see this is the Rubenzoris. This should be all forest, nothing left. This Kanyamabanyenga, this is Beni. There's a little road going there. And this, I've got no hope that you're going to ever recover this area back to a forest. This is the roads, just to show you. This is the vehicle that we traveled to the Rubenzoris, and ask them, is this road's always bad like this? As they say, in the wet season, it's even worse than this. You get the Uturi war. Is one of the worst war in the world. A lot of cannibalism. It's the Hena and the Hema that fights again. And the Lena is a Tutsi tribe, and the Hema is a Hutu tribe, and they're fighting for a long time already. And I don't see any way how they're going to make peace in that area. If you climb the Rubenzoris nowadays, you'll see that's the remnants of the glaciers. They're melting, a big problem. So the Congo Basin is on the brink of an unprecedented environmental emergency. It is critical. It's a bad situation in that area. So if you look at the gorilla, the brain of this gorilla is a small one, but the big gorilla's brain is about 500 milliliters. It's the same as the Australopithecus africanus. But the gorilla's brain is much more active because the brain flow through the cannula and the cranium is much more. So it's a clever animal. So I was wondering what this gorilla thinks about. Let's just make a few conclusions. If we think about the rest of Africa, with all the knowledge that we have now, look at Africa. Look at the northern part of Mozambique. At the moment, a big problem. That's why I brought it in. All the attacks by jihadists, there's Al Shabaab coming in this area, and that is the places where they had problems, big problems. If you project it on the oil fields, you see it's exactly the same. So it's exactly the same situation you had in the Congo. And big problems, SADC, South Africa, and everybody tries to help here. They send in troops. They couldn't get their troops together. They couldn't commit. Too late, and then eventually and nothing happens. Mozambique government and the military is not good enough to control this area. You can see all these incidents right on these oil fields. So it's money, it's not about politics. Came along the same person, Paul Kagame, and he sent his troops from Rwanda here. This is the best troops in Africa. It's a small army, but it's an excellent, disciplined army. And within 1 month, Al-Shabaab was out of the country. And now, at the moment, as you know, the Troika with Cyril Ramaphosa and everybody is meeting with Mozambique in Malawi to try and sort this thing out. But Mozambique do not trust South Africa because they choose the wrong side in the DRC, in the Congo war as well. So we will see what's going to happen there. But at least they throw out the Al-Shabaab. Why it's important for us to know. This is the area of the conflict. This is one of the most beautiful game reserves in Africa, the Nyasa Game Reserve. 42,000 kilometers. There's a big area with a lot of buffer zones, hunting areas around, and also the potential to have corridors to game reserve in southern parts of Mozambique. And this just came out of the previous war, and everybody's building up a lot of elephants, lions, everything, a huge, huge area. And that's under threat again, and a serious threat at the moment. So Africa have got 1,100 species of mammals. This is all the endangered mammals. Still looking, if you compare it to the rest of the world, not bad. If you project the populations of the world, you will see that all the endangered animals, that's the red areas. The threatened animals is in the areas where human population is the biggest. This circle, there's more people living in this circle than outside of this circle. So if you've got high populations of people, you've got endangered animals. So, but Africa is still okay, except for Madagascar. But this is going to change very drastically in the next few years, in the next 30 years. This is the fertility rate of countries. And you can see Africa is going to grow much faster than other countries. This is what they project. This is Africa. This is all the other continents. Asia will also come down, but Africa is going up. To put it in perspective, in the next, to 2015, the next 30 years, Africa is at the population at the moment is 1.3 billion. And they're going to increase by 1.3 billion. It's more than the rest of the world together. So, and you can see this, of the 20 countries with the fastest growing populations, only 5 is not in Africa. If you take the 20 poorest countries in the world, only 2 is not in Africa. If you take the most corrupt countries in the world, out of the first 20, 11 come out of the Africa, and you can see the DRC right at the top. Food insecurity, Africa is the problem, not the rest of the world. At the moment, 98 million Africans acute food problems. It's 25%. It's 1 out of every 4 Africans are undernourished. The world had a decline of 31% of people that's undernourished. Africa worsened. It's the place, the continent with the most conflict. There you can see this. Wars is much more a problem than in any other place, except for the Middle East and Iran, Iraq, and those areas. If you look at diseases, you can look at malaria, AIDS, all the diseases. Africa got more problems than the rest of the world. Malaria especially, but this is just a map of AIDS. If you look at this group of women, it's Ethiopian women, they all come to a clinic in Ethiopia, and you can see all of them got babies. All of them. Everyone have got a baby. So what is the problem? If you look at Ethiopia on top, if you're uneducated women, you will have 6.1 children in your life. If you've got secondary or any higher education, you will only have 2. So education is the answer for Africa. Is it true for the rest of Africa? Look at Nigeria and Kenya. This is just primary education. If you've got no education in a Nigerian woman, you're going to have more than 6 children. Same too in Kenya. If you just got some primary education, it will go down under 6. If you can complete it only primary school, you will have less than 4. If you want to empower a woman, a poor woman, it's better for her to look after 2 children than 4. It's the big thing is, and there's a lot of other advantages. Education versus health. The better you educated a woman, the better the health, the better the income, they will live longer, everything will be better. So you look at this woman, Samburu women in northern part of Kenya, You think, what is going to happen to Africa? And specifically the education, if you know, that is the answer. So women in education in Africa is 45% of women in Africa are uneducated. And there's 52 million girls that should be in school, out of school. And the quality of the education always sometimes lacking. So the education is the answer, and we are far away from proper education. This is what overpopulation looks like in Africa. So this is Africa. Let's make a decision. 44,000 years ago, you get a big migration down in Africa again. You know, we said 200,000 years ago, people moved out of Africa. But then we had big migration down Africa again. They came in high numbers, they built up in high numbers in this area in Western Africa, and then they start 2,000 years ago to migrate south, and huge build up of human beings in Africa. So we've got at the moment two problems again: global warming and overpopulation. The same we had 40,000 years ago. And that's why I say overpopulation, climate change, political incompetence, civil unrest, and that's the end of the game. I don't see how we're going to get out of this. Africa is going to lose its big game, and it's going to lose it within the next 30 years. This is a photo Hesti took. A lot of these photos from Hesti is an excellent photographer. This is outside of a national park. And it's beautiful to see these bull elephants fight. We're going to lose these areas. I'm 100% sure convinced of it. We already passed the threshold, and we're going to have in Africa about 60 to 70 national parks like little islands, and this is what we're going to have. And that's the end of the game of Africa, I think. Thank you very much.
Just saying a great presentation, but very sobering and depressing, to be quite honest. But anyway, lots of good information. Just curious about what the impact of COVID has been on the population within Africa, if you can speak to that.
Yeah, I've got the numbers. I think it's about 250,000 people dead, isn't it? I think the world deaths is just more than 5 million. I know that the figure is 0.002126% of the population. But the big thing is COVID didn't kill a lot of people, didn't kill almost nothing in comparison to the total populations. But what it did in the rest of the world, in some places, I mean, wild animals move into cities. But in Africa, they got opposite effect. Game rangers didn't get paid because of tourists not visiting these areas, and especially private lodges and things pay for a lot of these game rangers, and a lot of them has been big problems. And I think a lot of Chris and Johan and all these people will probably know better than me, but in COVID had a very negative effect on African wildlife.
Thank you very much, Mary and Willem, for the answer. Tom, I'm going to ask you to unmute your hands up.
Hi, very good. Thank you, Willem. Despite the fact that the material you presented is very depressing, at least to me personally, it's warming to know that there's people like yourself that have such a macro view, a comprehensive understanding of what's going on here on the topic. So my question actually is, what are your thoughts or views on this notion or the macro view of green militarization versus community-based resource management programs that are being tried and debated throughout all of Africa? I mean, how are those two programs going? Are there going to be trend lines, new trend lines for that based on what you have just presented?
Yeah, that's an interesting one, because the big thing is, what is the alternative than community involvement? My feeling is that if you go to these communities around these parks and in a lot of places, Namibia, Northern Kenya, all these places, eventually it is too many people. The population goes up, and I think eventually it's negative. if you take the Serengeti, the first game rangers, they said they asked them to allow the people to graze in the area, and he said the first game ranger said this is the end of it's not going to allow it, and that's why the Serengeti survived. But if you don't involve the people, what is the alternative? There is no alternative. So I don't think it's the best. It's the best we have. We have to get the community involved, but we must empower the people. We must get the population growth down. We have to empower the women in these areas. And then on a long term, I think we can do it. There's no alternative than to get them involved. And in some places, it works very well. And it started off in Zimbabwe. You remember those old campfire systems. It initially worked very well. If you look in Botswana, the areas around the swamps, it's all private owned places. And it works quite well. But I've been to a place just a few months ago, and the population growth in this little village is going up, and people haven't got work and they want to farm. It's going to be a conflict all the time. But there's no alternative.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I see Patrick Otomo, your hand's up. I'm going to ask you to unmute.
Hi, good evening. Yes,
Good evening.
Thank you, Willem. Thank you, Willem, for a very interesting talk. I have one question. I'm actually from Gabon, which is the basin, the Congo Basin that you presented about, and thank you for bringing some fun memories to me. It's actually observing and growing up in the lush green forest of the area that inspired me to become a zoologist. My question is, you went pretty far back in history and connected with the recent political events in the area of the Congo Basin and around Rwanda and the political situation. But would you be able to expand as to what the impact of colonialism could have been, and shaping up what the region is? Because it through the European bringing guns, for instance, in the area, that we as the people of the Congo Basin discovered that there is a higher firing power that could allow us to kill these baboons and these game quicker. But interestingly, you didn't kind of work at this sort of data in the story, especially as not only the firing power and the giving hunters a higher capability to wipe out the biodiversity, but also how that might have affected the political landscape of the time. So would you be able to expand on that? Do you have some sort of data that might explain how colonialism eventually would have affected directly or indirectly biodiversity in Africa?
Thank you. That's a very difficult question, but I think what I can say about Gabon is, I'm going to talk about the DRC just now, is that Gabon has still got huge elephant numbers of forest elephant. Very nice. This is just a very positive. So I talked about DRC, but colonial powers, especially in the DRC, in the Congo at that stage with Leopold II, was a terrible time. You know about the atrocities that happened, and so the DRC started off, or the Congo at that stage, later Zaire and then DRC, started off very badly. A lot of animal killings, a lot of development. You know about the people that they Leopold got this whole colony only for himself. It's a personal belonging, and then eventually the Belgians forced him to give it over to the Belgians, but with a lot of atrocities, a lot of bad. They started off badly, and but that's not an excuse for people today to use that and say, well, this is what happened. We can improve, because after that, when Mobutu came into power with the help of the Belgians and Americans, you will remember the murder of Lumumba and all that stories. I mean, that is even it starts off bad and then it just escalated. Mobutu, Kabila, even bad. Joseph Kabila at the moment, I think is a different, maybe. I think he grew up in a different way, the Western background. He speaks English. He worked in southern part of Tanzania as a tourist guide. So he will understand some of the nature conservation work. But I agree with you, yes. Leopold II didn't have good reputation, and that put the whole Congo on the back foot. That is definitely true.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. I'm going to go down the line. Elreen Hoffman, you're next. Then Chris, I will ask you to.
I'm not sure how relevant my question will be to the whole presentation, as I missed part of the presentation as I was still at work. But we did an assignment on the reconcilability of conservation with the employment rate. Do you maybe think if we employ more of the African people and decrease the unemployment rate, do you think it can have a positive influence on conservation for wildlife?
There's no doubt. If people work, if it goes bad with people, if people are hungry, if people are out of work, it's not good for nature conservation. That's a fact. And the big thing is what I said is to empower women, especially to educate them, to get them work and jobs. It will make a big difference. There's no doubt about that.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Chris, you're next.
Thank you very much, Ruan. I just want to make a comment, but before I do so, I had my friend and colleague Ian Cockrell. He had his hand up and then he dropped his hand. So Ian Cockrell, do you still want to come in? No. It was okay. Then it's all good. Willem, I do want to say that I am not sure if it is ironically so or from a psychodynamic perspective interesting that you have this huge elephant behind you on your screen. And saying that, I also want to say that you are bringing the elephant into the room. Overpopulation is the problem. But it's also the problem that we so hesitate to talk about. And we so hesitate to address this because there are so many sensitivities. If I look at your statistics, which is absolutely correct, we've done the same research. The higher the educational level, the lower population level, it's just as it is. The higher the education level, the better the socioeconomic circumstances. There's a direct correlation. And with all the sensitivity around this and touching the elephant in the room, I just think that it is time that we as humans start really talking about this and addressing this. We cannot walk around it. We have to address it. And I think that's for me the primary value of you raising this tonight. It's frightening. It's honest. It's frightening. And it's heartbreaking. It's also true. And the debate needs to become a world debate and not something that we see sweeping under the carpet. So to our audience, we understand the sensitivities. What do you do with suffering people? But the elephant in the room has to be addressed. We can't get around it. And that's just my sharing my inner feelings with everyone here tonight, and just want to say it cannot be the elephant in the room any longer without addressing it. We have to get to it. Just the opinion, and thank you for allowing me the extra time just to add my little bit. Thank you, Ruan.
Thank you very much, Chris. I'm going to go down the line as you put up your hands. Peter Mills, you are next, then Alison, and then Ashley. Peter, you're muted. There we go.
Hi. I just wanted, I wasn't going to talk about the point, but since Chris brought it up, about population. It depends what you're talking about. So population's not a problem if you're not worried about biodiversity. Because we can create novel systems, we can make more food and spread it around the world. If we had the money, if we had the transport capability, we can feed more people, but it'll come at the expense of wildlife. There's a very nice YouTube presentation by Hans Rosling. He's dead now, but he was a mathematician, and he worked on population dynamics. And the world population is about to will top out at about 10 to 11 billion. It's unstoppable. It's going to stop. Africa is going to go from 1 billion it is now to 4 billion. The other countries apart from Asia, which is going to go up 1 billion, they're at 3 billion now, they're going to go up 2 billion. North America, Europe, and the other Western countries all going to stay at about 1 billion. So it depends what you're talking about. So you must be careful to say population is the problem. We need to address the population issue, but we need to address it not at the expense of biodiversity. But I just actually wanted to say something about the earlier question. Somebody spoke about the militarization of the ranger and community-based natural resource management. And you can't actually separate the two. And anybody who knows me knows I work very closely with rangers. So I kind of have an idea of what's going on there. The issue of the militarization of the ranger is something that has been forced on us from outside and through journalism and getting the wrong message across. The ranger's role has always been a policing role. It's always been to uphold the rule of the laws of the country where they are rangers. So it's more of a policing thing. With the onset of poaching in certain areas, Kruger Park, we have the rhinos. In the DRC, we lose more rangers there than anywhere else in the world. They're fighting militia. What do you want them to do? Carry around roses? They have to be equipped to deal with that specific situation. Most of the rangers don't come close to carrying a rifle. In some countries, it's illegal for them to carry a rifle. So it's a misnomer to push this militarization of the ranger more than it really is. And most of the areas where our rangers work are automatically involved in community development and community upliftment programs. So they are intertwined, and there's very little difference between the two. So I just wanted to make that point. It is not one or the other. It is sometimes the one works better than the other for that specific circumstance. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Peter, for your comments. I'm going to move to Alison next. Alison, I'm going to ask you to unmute. There we go.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. My name is Alison Reed. I'm a filmmaker from Canada, a friend of Ashley's, and I had the pleasure of working with Francois Deakin and Andy Tutchings, who let me know about this seminar, while I was making a film called The Woman Who Loves Giraffes, which is about the woman that Francois mentioned, Anne Innes Dagg. This has been an incredibly informative seminar. I can't believe it. So thanks everyone for all this information. When the film came out, Anne's primary reason for making it was because she was concerned about giraffes and giraffe conservation. And so she sort of continued along that line, and her daughter, Mary, who spoke earlier, have set up the Anne Innes Dagg Foundation. And so I was so glad to hear you talk about empowering women, because that is another tangent of the Anne Innes Dagg Foundation, encouraging women in STEM and things like that. but since I've heard your talk, I mean, you just opened up a whole new level of the advantage of educating women, and especially educating local women. So the Anna Stagg Foundation has put some support behind the Wild Nature Institute that is educating in schools all around Tanzania right now. So that's fantastic, and we'll, you know, make sure we're focusing on that as well. The other thing that you mentioned was engaging local people and how important that is. And I was just wondering, it'd be interesting to take a survey of the 100 or so people that are watching this. How many are local people? And I don't know, I get the feeling there aren't that many. So I was wondering, since this happens every Thursday, if there's a way of somehow getting more local people to tune into this, because it's really educational. Anyway, that's my 2 cents, and nice to sort of meet everyone, and keep on going. What else can we do?
True.
Thanks, Alison.
Thank you very much, Alison. Willem, anything
Willem,
to add on
Willem?
Alison and Peter's comments, maybe?
I just want to say maybe to Peter's comments, you know, if we know the people working in a place like Java, an island the size of the Free State, and there's 140 million people on it, and they look after the Java rhinos, and there were no poachings for the last 3-4 years, and that's why they work with the local people. That's the point. We have to go that way in Africa as well.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Peter, I'm going to give you a chance now. I just want to move to Ashley, and then I'll give you a chance again. Ashley, I'm going to ask you to unmute. There you go.
Perfect. Thank you, Ron. Willem, I remember 4 years ago when I was sitting at your house with you and Hesty, and you first started kind of going through some of this, what was kind of happening in Africa, and that was 4 years ago. And I remember just being blown away by what I was seeing at the time. And that was coming off of spending several years traveling all over Africa myself, shooting a documentary about giraffes for National Geographic. So after that time, I came back and started seeing what I could do to push this message to try to get people in the West more interested in this problem. And I remember at the time you were talking about the fact that the only way this gets solved is it's twofold. You have to have local buy-in for this message, that we have to educate people and we have to stop cutting things down and we have to stop killing animals. But you have to have support from the West to enable these people to do what they need to do in these local areas. And in the last 4 years, I've really seen that there isn't the stomach in the West to gravitate towards this message or to spread this message. I think from the Western point of view, it feels like it's too hard of a message. We don't want to push that right now. We just want to put people in front of televisions and have them be entertained by superheroes and whatnot, and this gets glossed over. So I think that's a difficulty, and I don't know how we overcome that. And I'm saying this as a film producer myself, that the people above me that put everything out there for people to see, every now and then they'll grab something that they'll push out there that grabs people and puts interest behind this. But I think it's a real problem that most of the West doesn't know about this at all. And that the few people that do know about this, I think would be very much behind or very much in support of spreading this message. But there just doesn't seem to be the stomach to do so. And I think it's because it's not all, rainbows and roses and whatnot. It's not a happy message. So I know, Willem, you go around and give this talk whenever you can. How do you think we get people interested in this and whatnot? I mean, is it grassroots, things like this? Because I would love to think that there's a way to make it bigger where we get people interested in it in the West and support what's happening locally in Africa.
Ashley, nice to see you again. Fantastic. Ashley, I don't know. I think I'm convinced that less than 1% of the people on this planet, and it includes everybody in the West, is not worried about nature. Really not worried about nature. if they, there's a lot of people that say the right things and things, but they don't know. You can just ask a person who says he likes nature. You just ask him a few questions, ask him what's that bird's name, and you'll find that they're not that interested. I think that's the big thing. Is we talk about uneducated Africans to educate them, but the Western people also uneducated, in especially in nature. They see things they want to see. And I don't know how you're going to do it. You are in a business that I think you can make a difference to get the right message across. But I've got no hope, because I think I'm very negative, and I don't. This is not a nice thing to do. But I'm not. The people are not really interested in nature. They don't worry about a little frog in the mountains in the southern part of Tanzania. They're not. Not even the Western people. They like a nice story, and that's it. I know that you tried to get the message over, and that some people say that their audience will not like that sort of thing. You don't want to say it. So that is, for me, a big problem.
Yeah. Thank you. Good to see you.
Thank you very much, Ashley. Peter, I'm going to ask you. There we go. Yes, you have the screen.
I was going to respond to the lady who said the locals, and I just want to know what she means by that, because I'm a local. And I think there are lots of people here that are locals, but it feeds directly into the rest of the discussion that we've been having. And I agree with Willem about people in the West need to be educated about animals. They need to be educated about Africa. And that's one of our biggest problems in conservation in Africa. We haven't been allowed to develop our own conservation ethic that works from us. And whenever we do, you can go to the Namibian model. I don't know if anybody's been aware of this report that's just come out by Born Free Foundation about the Namibian. Namibia has probably got the best conservation model, where they've given people power to manage their own wildlife. That's a good thing, right? So whenever somebody tries to do something, something's homegrown in Africa, like Campfire or like Namibia or something like that, it gets interfered with. We haven't been allowed to develop our own ethic, and we've got to stop thinking about conservation as we have been, and we've got to look at systems and management, and we have to work from within, from the people on the ground. We depend too much on external influences from the West.
And Peter, we depend too much on aid, which is logic. But then the minute that you depend on aid, you also depend on the opinion and the manipulation of those who provide the aid. It's just such a diverse problem, and a bit of a catch-22. Listen, I just wanted to mention that we have another program we started on Share Screen Africa, where we bring in lecturers and practitioners live into the training rooms of universities, colleges, conservation organizations. And one of the sort of further down the line initiatives is to bring in the folklore and the stories of the elderly, the communities who lived for centuries in and around these parks, to share with the students of today how they lived, how they saw, how they viewed these things. Now that will come in time. We're just sort of trying to settle ourselves in the first steps. But if we also understand and hear what these people think and say, and how they survived and how they live, we might get total new perspectives. I think just listening to those who's lived in these regions is just vital. We have to listen to understand. But Peter, then I also agree with you that the fact is, who are the communities and who's who, but again, complicated, not simple. Important, Willem, that we face this, facing it and dealing with it. At the end, when the crises start and we start facing the crises, then only people start jumping. But somebody said in the chat, I don't have time to, I can't remember exactly who said it. The answer lies in the woman and in education. That's an interesting comment that we should look at. Anyway, Ruan, I don't want to take over here. I think we might unmute everybody. There's still 86 people on here, which is saying so much. It's like, Willem, we're a little bit stunned. And we have to absorb this and work through it. You know, that's what it is. But there's still 86 people after, well, long, more than an hour and a half. That says a lot. So let's just unmute everybody and give Willem a round of applause for being brave enough to put it out there. And then we go back to questions and answers. Everybody unmuted. Maret, just wait a second to see that you're unmuted. Now you're going to hear a lot of news. And there we go. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, bud.
Thank you. Over to you, Ruan.
Thank you. Just from the behind the scenes crew, we want to thank Willem and Hestie for her work and help as well. Alison, I don't know. Mark, I know your hand's up. I'll get to you now. Alison, I don't know if you want to, if you have any comments on what Chris said. If you do, you can just wave or not. It's all good. There we go. I'm going to ask you to unmute.
Hey, am I unmuted?
Yes, you are.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, yes, I understand what Peter is saying. Maybe a better way for me to have phrased it would have been indigenous people, because it seems like involving indigenous communities is one of the keys. I think maybe it was just a semantics thing, but I'd be very interested to know what other people are think about that topic. Cool. I may be wrong, I may be off, I don't know, I'm very new to this game, but that was my
Alison, there's many people around this table who's been there, done it.
Yeah.
Several of you sitting there, and you are right. You're right. I mean, you're right. There's lessons to be learned. We have to involve it. Willem said it earlier, we cannot ignore it. We cannot. We have to face it. If you look at the number of people, indigenous people living on the borders of Kruger National Park, we spoke about it earlier. If you're looking at about 3 million people just touching the park type of situation, you cannot go around it. You got to go through it.
Yeah.
I wrote the article from a total different perspective, facing death, the value of facing death, because when you face death, very often then you start seeking answers, but you have to face the possibility of death before you start seeking answers. But I think Mark Lottig, Ruan should be unmuted to come in. Thanks, Alison.
There we go. Thank you very much. Cool. There we go. Mark, you can unmute yourself.
Yeah, so I'm one of these people who knows very little about anything and tries to take a very broad perspective. A particular interest of mine is to understand how we make decisions. And I think I think we're facing a philosophical problem quite seriously, because it isn't really, I think, the lack of information. This was a fantastic reminder about the dynamic in Africa. But I've heard countless similar talks here in Europe. I live in Berlin, where people have made, done analysis about where this is all going. And it is a very similar story, maybe not quite as granular as what we just heard, but it isn't lack of information. I think it is lack of an agreement about what is the variable we want to solve for. And for what it's worth, I have two friends, one works in conservation and one works in human development, and they're married, and I don't know how they do it, because if your dinner is boring, all you do is get them to talk to each other, and they end up basically in a dogfight. And I think that's ultimately the issue we have to deal with. What is the answer? What's actually the question we want to answer? And I think that's really the real big question. And there is no local answer to this. I think, as we've heard from so many of the commentators today, it's always at least a regional, maybe a national, maybe a continental, and maybe a global question that we have to ask ourselves. And I don't know who said that people aren't interested in nature in my space. The answer is they somehow are, but I don't think they actually remember what nature really is. So the nature they're interested in has nothing to do with the nature we need to talk about if we want to come up with an answer.
Thank you very much for your comments, Mark. Willem, so ask you to unmute. There we go. Willem, you have to unmute yourself. Or Marit, maybe you can help.
Maybe we decided to keep him muted.
Yeah, there's so many aspects, and I think, the big thing is even the Western world, as we said, Peter said it as well, is there's no real effort, but to identify the problem first, make big decisions. I mean, as Mark said, is very important. But again, I don't see, we are not near it. If you go to these summits, they would always on the agenda talk about overpopulation. They never did it. They talk about the nice things. But another thing also is important. I see myself as an African, so I see myself as a failure here, and we are also in the same boat. But I'm very negative, and I think we've got two filmmakers here on this platform at the moment. We have to, in a way, get money together and get this message out. What Peter said was very interesting. I think that is exactly what we should carry out. And I think we should encourage them to do it and get the money together and at least tell the people what was going on.
Thank you very much, Willem. Peter, I'm going to ask you to unmute. Your hand is up.
Yeah, I just want to fully agree with the previous speaker from Berlin. I don't remember the guy's name, but I fully agree with him. But what I really wanted to say was there are very few projects that are happening around the world, conservation projects where communities aren't involved. And at the IUCN conference in September last year, indigenous communities were given an official voice at that forum. And I don't know if everybody is aware of what the IUCN is all about, but it is the biggest conservation NGO and government organization in the world, and it basically gives us all direction is what we should be doing. And indigenous communities are very much part of that forum.
Thank you very much. Yes, Willem, of course.
What I want to say is there's another very important thing we haven't talked about tonight is in Africa, especially, if the government is not buying into nature conservation, it's very difficult to work in that area. I mean, we've got all these technical things. We know we have to work with the locals. We know what to do. I mean, I think this is Mark that said it. We know that we've got the facts. But the government, if you want to do nature conservation, the government is not involved. It's very difficult. And it's proven. You can you talk to people like African parks. They don't even try in areas to do something if the government is not involved.
Totally agree, Willem. We, the LCA, we don't do anything. We don't do anything if we have not gone through the government. Politics is what it is, and you have to go with the government. You have no choice. And it's also the right thing to do, because otherwise you will start up and you will not survive. So yeah, 100% agreed.
Wonderful.
I see a lot of, I see a few faces, and the faces I look at are all quite serious.
Yes.
And I understand that, because it's a serious matter. And I think here we have people around the table who care. This is why they are here. And you feel yourself so sort of powerless in all this, trying to juggle the variables and the possibilities. And like Mark Lottick said, it's also a philosophical question that we are facing here. And what is the question? So yeah, it's a tough one. It's a tough one, but need to talk about. And the good thing to start our year like this, let's face it, and be part of the solutions wherever we can find it. Ruan, I see it's nearly 9:15.
Yes.
Yeah, I think
on that note of yours, we should we have the general rule of, if we have 25 or less people on, or just one screen, or it's just there. But I think if we wrap it up for the evening, I just want to thank everyone that added to the chat section that we did not get a chance to get to, especially Andre the Georges. Thank you very much for all your comments. And I hope everyone read all of the comments in the chat section. Apologies for not getting to all of those. We had a lot of very interesting questions and comments coming from the audience live. And then just again, thank you very much, Willem and Desi, for an absolutely mind-opening catharsis of a talk. Thank you very much. And I think if we can all give them another round of applause, that would be absolutely incredible. And then we can say good morning, good evening, good night. Enjoy your day, sleep well, and have wonderful dreams. And thank you very much for joining us. And I hope to see you all again next week when we have our next and following talks. Thank you very much, Willem.
Well, I would like to say we from our side, we're not going to kill it now. I will not leave immediately. So those of you who just want to stay in and say hi to Willem and say hi to your grandmother and whoever is on, you're welcome to do so.
More than welcome to.
And then when we're down, we just switch it off. But the rule is we switch off when there's 25 people remaining. And now we are still 69 people. So you can stay on and just say hi if you want to. Otherwise, we will just leave. Thanks, Ruan, and thanks to you, Johan, and the team behind the scenes. And Johan, for saving our bacon. You will know. Thank you very much, Willem. All right. So those of you who want to say hi to Willem and greet your friends, you're welcome to do so. Leonora, we've got your photo, we've got your address. Johan is going to get hold of you somehow. All right.
Thank you very much. And I just wanted to add to watch the talk with a 10-year-old and an 11-year-old. And some of the time frames mentioned by Willem, around 30 years. Yeah, it's fairly depressing. And my son was holding on for the end for the silver lining. And then there was no silver lining. So, yeah, that's quite hard.
Sorry to interrupt with you, Leonora. There's a silver lining behind you on your screen.
That's the same son who changed my background. So
okay, so there's a silver lining. We will find it, and you're going to be part of it, and so will your children. We have to find the silver lining. We have
exactly. Yeah.
We have to find it. Yeah, I always look what is behind people's screen, and I see you've got a silver lining. So keep it up. But again, Willem, I say to you that this principle that I use also as part of post-traumatic stress disorder and relevant and such matters. My approach is facing death. You have to face what you are facing, and only then you start seeking the real solutions. Otherwise, you run in circles. And when you spoke about it earlier, you know, do people really know and understand what we're talking about, protection and so on? I said earlier today to one of my colleagues that somebody said, yeah, I'm really into conservation. Don't worry, Chris, I'm into conservation. My wife and myself, we spend all our time to go to all these islands and for our holidays. And by going to these islands, we support conservation, and it's 5-star places they go to. and they really think they're into conservation, is to go holiday on islands. So it's also relative, Mark Lottig, it's just also relative. Anyway.
Can I come in? Can I come in here, Chris?
Yeah, of course, Peter, you're one of us, man.
Yeah, yeah. Look, yeah, which begs the question is, when should you call yourself a conservationist, and when can you not call yourself a conservationist? That's another debate. But Willem mentioned it, and you picked up on it, was this issue about government backing. It is, of all the stuff I've read, the bottom line is, if the government's not involved or the government doesn't have buy-in, your project won't get off the ground. And so that's critical. But there was another point, and Willem also mentioned it, but it was a point I made in the chat box, was that under our current system, our management system in Africa, no matter what goodwill we have and how much we empower people on the ground, we won't, with a hegemony over power and corruption that pervades African governments, we will not be able to achieve anything. And that, you know, Willem, your talk was, I don't like to look at it in as so negatively, because there's a lot of good happening, and I think we should acknowledge that. And I mean, it is scary and so on, but there's a lot of good happening out there. And but if without government buy-in, all those projects, all the good that is happening out there is going to come to nothing. And that to me is more scary than Willem's talk.
Yeah, no, that is 100%.
Are you there, Willem?
Yes, I listen.
He lost his voice. I want to make one addendum, Peter, and that is, I've spent probably the last 20 years, I grew up in Africa, and like Willem, I call myself an African. I am African, no doubt. My fiber is African, and I don't want to be in any other place but Africa. And the one thing I do want to just add to what you said is, and that came out indirectly also in the question about the colonialism, the corruption has two sides to it. If a minister in a country or a group of ministers in a country have in Credit Suisse over 11 billion euros, where did they get that 11 billion euros? Where did they get it? From within Africa? No ways. No ways. So the corruption goes through the world. And the blue collar corruption is happening all the time, also coming from the unpopular word to use, but the first world countries. I mean, let's just ask yourself where the money comes from. It's a world thing. It's a world thing. It's not just Africa. Africa has learned, and sadly so too. It's there's a buyer and there's a seller, and that's where a lot of that come from. Yeah. Anyway, I had a yeah. Sorry, I've got to stop talking.
Chris, sorry, I haven't seen Andre in years. Hi, Andre, how are you? Unmute yourself.
It's like an instruction. You will unmute yourself. Where's Andre?
Yeah.
Which Andre?
How are you, Andre? How are you doing?
Andre, we can't hear you. For some odd reason.
He's got no comms. We tried earlier. Are you talking, Andre?
Okay.
No, he's no comms. Sorry about that.
Okay, I'll put your thumb up if you're good.
He's good. He's putting his thumb on the camera. He's good. Grace, Grace, come in, unmute yourself, please, and join us. And then Alreen. Grace? No.
Hello.
Alreen?
There, we can hear you, Andre.
You can hear me now?
Yeah, there we go. Yes.
How you doing? It's Peter, a long time no see.
Yeah. Yeah, you happy?
I found this talk very interesting because, I mean, it pretty well confirms all my experiences across Africa. I personally believe that there needs to be a massive educational program, as happened in the generation of my mom, who grew up on a peach farm with 11 brothers and sisters. They moved into, one of them was able to farm full time, the other two worked part time, one on a factory, one delivering mail. The other 8 ended up in urban middle class. Today I have 27 cousins. One of them farms. The rest are doctors, lawyers, whatever, teachers. And instead of having 11 kids, they've got 2 on average. And unless those kind of changes take place, the wildlife in Africa is going to have a problem. People have got to be taken out of the subsistence lifestyle. On the other hand, foreign aid has been used, as mentioned, to manipulate and control the economies of African countries to get out cheap natural resources. And little white boys and girls are coming over from America and Europe. They're trained in management, as George Hughes and Natal Parks Board told me. We use researchers to collect data, fill data gaps. We have managers to manage our parks and protected areas, Natal. And the people coming over, kicking people off their land where they lived for centuries into areas that can't sustain them, is not the solution. And these traditional resource users need to be integrated into the management of these areas and made part of the solution instead of being seen as part of the problem. Until I came to Kenya, I never met a great white hunter. I hunted across Francophone Africa with great black hunters, and they have what they call chasse libre areas. And here, these are community-run areas. The community manages them. The traditional hunters can hunt to feed the village. Certain animals cannot be hunted because they're safe for people like me that are going to pay them decent money. And there's a lot of different models that need to be looked at, but ultimately, unless people are taken off the land into a middle-class lifestyle, well, you know, Chris mentioned it, where the population is going to more than double in the next 50 years, as per Peter Beard, it's going to be the end of the game. And if the donors really cared, they put a massive amount of money into educating people. We had a program when I was at Swanee. We brought kids from all over Africa to study wildlife, you know, nature conservation, wildlife management. It was a drop in the bucket as to what was needed. And it was funded by the international hunting community, but eventually they tired of it and it kind of slowed up. But if the Western donors, if DFID, USAID, the World Bank, GTZ would put money into education, and then at the same time, instead of taking out cheap natural resources out of Africa and transforming them and getting added value overseas, transform all these valuable natural resources. Coltan, columbite tantalite was mentioned. I think microchips and the likes are made out of that. Well, there's a microchip shortage being made out of where? I think China or somewhere in Southeast Asia. Why can't those things be made in Africa? To employ Africans, create a middle class, take pressure off these rural areas. People, Andy Wilkinson, a PhD from Zimbabwe, called it politics of despair, with people rotating back and forth between urban slums and rural areas and doing whatever it takes to survive. You know, charcoal making, pit sawing, poaching wildlife, poaching fish in an unmanaged way. All those resources can be managed sustainably if the people would be helped to integrate them, integrated into the management of those areas. And number two, at the same time, get people out off the rural areas. If where my mom grew up, everybody had to farm. With today, with just my one family having like 30 some cousins, the mountains of Appalachia would be deforested. They look like Kikuyu land with little plots and people surviving. That's all. But that changed, and Africa can change. It's got the wealth. It's got the knowledge. I mean, you guys in Africa have a first world educational system, first world technologies, and that can be linked into the rest of Africa. That was one of our hopes at Swanee University. That didn't quite happen, but anyway, I need to shut up.
I don't know whether, sorry, Chris, I just want to say that I don't know whether people are aware that Andre did his PhD with, and wrote how many volumes? 12 volumes on all of this. You've covered all of this and it's available. I don't know if you just want to say,
yeah, you can go on ResearchGate under my name, Andre DeGeorge, and download what turned into a 7-volume book on Africa. We have one on the Taliban. We have peer-reviewed and gray literature and PowerPoint presentations that are available. People involved in levels of education might find them useful.
Peter, we are aware of this, and we asked Andre to do a talk, but he finished his talk tonight now, so his turn is over. Andre, thank you so much. I know that Alreen has been have a hand up for a long time. Alreen, you want to come in, please?
Yes. As I said earlier, I did my honors last year, and Dr. Francois Deacon was one of my lecturers. And what was very interesting for me when we had to do our assignments, when we had to look for sources for our questions, there were not much information and literature done in South Africa for South Africa, but there were a lot more sources that I could find. I don't know what my the other students found, but what I found was more in America and the other countries. So I think one of our problems also is that there's not much research done specific. There is research done, but not as much for South Africa and in African countries. So I think when we also know more, when there's more information on what is going on in South Africa and in the other African countries, then we can address the problem, because how can you address the problem if you don't know what is the problem? And as some people have said before, the government does play a large role, as we saw as well, as they provide the sources and in most of the cases also the funding for conservation programs. And I think that is like I saw in our study guides as well, most conservation occurs on privately owned land. So I think if there are more funding available for private game ranchers that do not get as much support, then maybe conservation will be a lot easier. Lot easier. Thank you.
Dr. Willem, do you want to answer the student, or does Dr. Francois Deacon want to answer the student?
I think Francois will
sorry
be better.
that I'm referring.
Can I just maybe just say one thing? I see Fremantle is also on the group. Fremantle is very interesting, and I think you will be very interested in it. Fremantle works in Ujenkulen on Java rhinos, and all these things, especially what Peter said, they are doing there. It's a very interesting guy to talk to, and I see he's still on the group, working with the Java rhinos, the most endangered animal in the world. So it's a very interesting guy.